Hello everyone. I would like in this presentation to answer the question, what is Linux? This is my name and this is my email. If anyone has any question about Linux, I will be glad to help. So in general, we can say that Linux is an open source operating system that is characterized by its security, speed, freedom, and zero cost. But to be more specific, Linux actually is an open source kernel. So it is just the kernel. Not everything you use is Linux. And this kernel is used by many Linux-based distributions. So in the following slides, we will try to answer the questions: what exactly is open source, what exactly is a kernel, and what is a distribution. And we will try to see the benefits of using Linux. Here in the right, we see Tux, which is the penguin, and it is the mascot of Linux operating system. Before we answer this question, we should know that Linux runs most of the internet servers and infrastructure. It also runs all of supercomputers worldwide. Many embedded devices such as TVs and Raspberry Pis and many other embedded devices use Linux. Android operating system is also based on Linux. Also, many desktops, about 2.8% of desktops worldwide are using Linux, and this number is increasing, and this is mainly due to the troubles people facing with Microsoft Windows. Let's start by answering the question, what is open source and what is open source software? Open source software gives the user the freedom to use, modify, and redistribute the software and its source code. This freedom is guaranteed by the license of the software. Many licenses are open source, such as GNU Public License or GPL. This is the logo for Open Source Initiative. We can see here some examples of open source applications. For example, LibreOffice is an alternative for Microsoft Office. Blender is a very famous application for 3D design. GIMP is used for image editing. Audacity is used for audio editing. Ubuntu, which is the most famous distribution for Linux. VLC Media Player is commonly used for media. MySQL database, Drupal, which is used for content design on the internet, and there are literally thousands of open source applications around the world. We said previously that Linux is a kernel. So, what exactly is a kernel? The kernel is the central program in the operating system, and it is responsible for the management and the communication with hardware and the files on the computer. So we can see here that the kernel communicates with the hardware, such as the CPU, the memory, the devices, and that the applications communicate with the kernel to use the hardware of the computer. It has been mentioned before that Linux is an open source kernel that's used by many Linux-based distributions. So, what is a distribution? A distribution is a collection of open source applications that are provided to the user in a usable form, usually as an ISO file. So these applications usually are available as a source code written in certain programming language such as C or C++. In the distribution, these programs are compiled and provided to the users in an executable form, usually using ISO files that are used to boot and use operating systems. Here to the right, we see many distributions such as Ubuntu, Kubuntu, Fedora, Mandriva, Debian, etc. There are actually hundreds of distributions used worldwide. We should know that many distributions are derived from other distributions, and each distribution has many flavors that are different just in the desktop environment. So, for example, here the Debian distribution and the Ubuntu distribution. Ubuntu distribution is a derivative from Debian distribution. So, there are many similarities between Debian and Ubuntu distribution. Now, regarding Ubuntu distribution, it has many flavors, such as Kubuntu, Zubuntu, and Edubuntu. Now, the only difference between these flavors is the desktop environment and the default applications that comes with the ISO file of the distribution, but they actually just flavors of the Ubuntu distribution. So, what makes Linux special and what are the advantages of using Linux over other operating systems? The first thing about Linux is speed. Linux is well known for its lightweight and it can be used on old computers that have low specifications. The other things about Linux is security and stability. Linux is well known for its stability. Generally, it's not affected by viruses, and you don't need antivirus when you use Linux, and you can use the computer for years without any need to format it. The other advantage of Linux is freedom. Because Linux is an operating system that is open source, you have the freedom to use the operating system and to make modification and to distribute your own distribution that is based on Linux without any problems. The other obvious advantage of Linux is cost, and that is because Linux is open source operating system, so there is no need to pay any amount of money for using Linux. The other great advantage of using Linux is ease of use. Usually Linux comes with a complete set of applications, so you don't need to install additional application when you use Linux. It also can run completely from USB memory without the need to install it on the computer. And it also recognizes hardware directly without the need to install additional drivers. Also, installing the software on Linux is very simple and it's done directly from the internet, usually using a package manager. I recommend watching the documentary Revolution OS. It is available on YouTube and it's also translated to Arabic language. This documentary talks about the history of open source and Linux operating system, and it presents many important issues and many important people that contributed to the development of open source and Linux operating system. At the end, thank you for watching, and I hope I was able to answer the question, which is what exactly is Linux?